Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And I sort of trailed this video in the last video where we were looking at the Met officer, another one convicted for doing terrible things to women. And I said that Mark Rowley, who is the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, he has issues, and he wishes it wasn't the case, but he has issues with the way the police operate. And he was being how can we put this? He's been announcing his wishes. He's been telling people the state of play in regards to how many officers are currently being investigated, how many are suspended, how definitely awful that the Met Police is, and of his intentions to try and change it root and branch. Now, I don't know how effective he'll be. I do think he absolutely needs to do so. I wish him well on his task. I think it's going to be a virtually impossible task because nobody is looking at the constant vetting of officers. No one's looking at the constant investigation of officers by other officers and by outside groups as well. It's the only way you're going to clean house in this condition. The officers won't like it and some will leave. Well, that's fine. If they leave, the ones who are leaving, the ones who don't like it, are the ones obviously with something to hide. And it should be part and parcel of the job that if you don't like to be investigated as an officer, then you've got no business being an officer. So we'll take a look at this to see what's happening and to see his views on all the problems facing the Metropolitan Police. And it is quite telling, I think. It's certainly made an interesting read, which is why I'm bringing it to you. So here goes. Now, Rowley was speaking in a podcast, and he was explaining the problems he's facing as the Chief Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police in terms of disciplinary and the way that the service is viewed outside of the police force. He's being, I'm going to say he's being very honest. And I do commend him, and I do think it's about time that we've had a senior officer who is completely honest. He's giving it unvarnished. He's not trying to spin. He's saying it's terrible, and he's going to try his best to fix it. And I don't doubt that he means it. I believe his sincerity, but I don't know how effective he will be. But anyway, we'll look at this. Met Police complains. It should be easier. The head of this is, I think, the head of the Met Police complains it should be easier to fire bad officers. As he reveals, he has over 500 staff on restricted duties amid standards probes. So Mark Rowley said that several hundred Met officers has been suspended. Now, before we get any deeper in that, these are just the ones where there's been accusations made and there is sufficient first sight evidence that we can suspend them and then investigate fully. It doesn't mean that these are the only ones under any kind of suspicion, because I've read elsewhere that there's actually over 1,000 officers in the Met alone under investigation, under suspension and under suspicion because they've had complaints made against them purely for sex offences. Never mind all the other stuff that they get up to. Purely that. And that kind of gives you the indication of what policemen in the Met truly are. But anyway, the Met Police Commissioner has complained that it should be easier to fire bad officers. As he reveals, he has over 500 staff on restricted duties. So Mark Rowley told the Newsagents podcast that several hundred of his officers have been suspended following investigations into police standards. He said it was with a heavy heart that he chose not to describe the Met Police as institutionally racist after Baroness Louise Casey's damning review into the force's culture and standards. She gave this review. It was truly awful. And he didn't like it. He agreed with it, but he didn't like it. And he said it could have gone further, he said. But he chose not to call them institutionally racist. I have to say it like that because too early in the video it throws up exceptions with YouTube. But he agrees that there are massive problems institutionally within the Met at all levels. So the Casey Review, published in March, found the force to be institutionally, this misogynist and homophobic. In the wake of a series of scandals, including the taking of Sarah Everard's life by a serving officer, and PC David Carrick being unmasked as a serial arer of women. Asked how many Met officers are currently being investigated over sexual and domestic abuse claims, Sir Mark told the podcast host Emily Maitlis it is many hundreds. And they're just the ones suspended. There's more that are not yet being investigated that we know. He says, I don't have the number at the top of my head, he says, but it is many hundreds. On how many Met officers have been suspended as a result of these investigations, he said, we have well over 500 who are restricted and several hundred who are suspended. So he's got many, many hundreds, as he called it. We're looking thousands, a minimum of 1,000. 500 are on restricted duties. Many hundreds, several hundreds are on, suspension. Plus there's others that they haven't found enough sufficiency yet to do other things too. It's over 1,000 officers. Isn't that appalling? In the entire police, you daren't trust the police because you don't know who the good ones are. You don't know who the bad ones are. He said, so I've said we need to get rid of hundreds of people. He says, if you look back over the last few years, the Met has been sacking 50 people a year. So clearly the answer has got to be a lot more than that. It's going to be hundreds of people we need to remove from the organisation who are serious challenge, at the same time as creating a stronger, healthier, better trained organisation that's more resistant to this in the future. Better vetting, regular vetting, change of culture that stops people keeping their mouths shut when they see things happening. External, regular examination of procedures. That's another one. He told the newsagent's co-host John Sopel, it's not as easy as it ought to be to rid the force of bad officers. So he wants to make it easier to get rid of them. And I think that's something we can all get behind. If you've got these bad cops, get them the hell out, So Mark added, so something that most people would have had no reason to know is that police officers aren't under normal employment law in most respects. They're under something called police regulations in terms of how performance is managed or how misconduct is investigated and dealt with. It is more bureaucratic, slower, more difficult than normal employment law. And so actually these issues are significant. And I've asked the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister to look at this, and the Mayor has asked them to look at this as well. So it's there. Government have been told about it. Government have been asked to do something about it. And the fact that nothing is happening is not, at this point of time, Mark Rowley's fault. He has raised the issues. The Mayor has raised the issues. The politicians are doing nothing. He said, on the need to improve the reputation of the Met, well, God almighty, do you? So Mark said it is his mission to deliver more trust, less crime and higher standards. Well, good luck with that. Because while you've got the officers you've got, your trust is destroyed. I don't know if it can ever come back. You may need to actually disband the Met Police and start from scratch and have smaller, sort of more localised units within the police. One of them, one giant monolithic culture. And sort of break it into, say, maybe 5 or 6 smaller London regional state police forces. Point of interest, and people don't realise this, how many police forces are there in London? There's the Met, there's the City Police, there's British Transport Police, there's River Police, there's Parks Police, and then there's Royal Protection Police. 6 police forces in London at the moment. So it's not as though it's a difficult thing to break up the police, the Metropolitan Police, into more units and just combine the existing police forces, well, most of them anyway, back into their local regional blocks. It'd be just as easy to do. There's no less bureaucracy. There's no more bureaucracy. but it does put the senior officers closer to the troops, which I think is a good idea. Anyway, he said, I would much rather be talking about the trust of the public and tackling crime with them, full stop. He says, the fact that I have to talk about standards and the fact alongside saying I've got tens of thousands of fantastic men and women, I've got hundreds who shouldn't be here, and that's professionally annoying. If you've got 10,000 people in the police and you've got at least 1,000 of them are dodgy, that means 10% of policemen in the Met are dodgy. And then you've got to look and go, who are the good ones again? Point me to the good ones. And you're just a guy walking down the street, you need an officer. Or worse, if you're a woman down the street and you need an officer, you want to know that he'll help you and not do something awful to you. You can't guarantee it, you just can't. It says, the vast majority of my colleagues, they're up for this, which is why we want to look at things like the Casey report. It was them who told the picture they want tackled. And responding to the findings of the Casey review at the time, Sir Mark said he accepted the diagnosis of racism, misogyny and homophobia in the Met, but would not use the term institutional because it had become politicised and it is ambiguous. So you have basically, just finishing off there, but basically you have a man who I think is dedicated to changing the police, the Met, specifically the Met. I think he genuinely wants to do it. He's not being given the tools by the politicians, so that's a political matter. But hey, look, it's any government just too slow. They just don't want to get involved in case things backfire and it comes back to bite them. But you can't go on as it is. So he's not getting support from his political overlords, if you will. But he's got a hell of a job because the actual culture, it isn't just rooting out the bad ones. It's the whole culture of the Met that he has to change. And I don't think you can change it when it's in this monolithic state. But anyway, good luck to him. I'm going to come up there. I've basically finished this. I'll come up. But I just thought it was a very interesting piece. And it goes to show that maybe he can change the Met. I mean, you want to hope so. But I'll guarantee this time next week I'll have reported on another 2 or 3 policemen from the Met who will have done terrible things. Coming up. I do think he needs to sit around a table, him, the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, the Chairman of the Police Federation, and they need to come up quickly with a way of getting rid of these bad officers. Now, the Police Federation may be a bit resistant to that because they're there to protect officers, but only to protect the good ones, surely. And if this cannot be addressed quickly, then I think the only other way in which it can be done is to remove the Metropolitan Police as an organisation entirely, and then doing that and restarting from scratch, and you bring in a new police force, but entirely different from existing forces, and you put everyone that's there can reapply, but they're working for a new force under a new contract, and you get around it that way. I think that's a possibility. It would certainly give an opportunity for everyone who is currently being investigated and everything to be quietly got rid of without having to go through all these bureaucratic procedures, and also then remove that monolithic structure and make policing more accountable. But that's just my tuppence worth. So who knows if anyone will ever listen to me? Probably not. Anyway, I shall finish there. Thank you very much for listening. I said it was an interesting piece, and it's very interesting to see that he is, and it seems to be anyway, an honest man who recognises the problems with the police. He doesn't necessarily have the solutions to the problem yet. He doesn't have those tools, but hopefully soon. Anyway, until next time, stay safe, stay well, never trust a policeman, and goodbye.